Monday, the 16th of May 2022, and here we are at the art gallery of Sanjay Dharamdas, located at 17 Quarry Road in Guacara, Trinidad. And by coincidence, we have two guests here, one of whom is nationally known and internationally known, and he is Glen Beadon. He came all the way from England to grace us with his presence today. It is a coincidental meeting. I had promised to meet him, but it was not planned. By chance, I came here to check my good friend Sanjay, who is seated there, and within minutes, Mr. Beadon had a pre-arranged meeting with Sanjay, and Sanjay seen me here related to Glen Beadon that I'm here, and he said to stay put, be here until he comes, and here is the gracious Mr. Beadon. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Beadon?
Well, the first thing I'll say is I'd like to introduce you to my brother-in-law,
Okay.
Mr. Graham Parkinson, who's down here. Graham's sister is married to my wife. Graham's sister is Graham's wife is my wife's sister.
Okay.
Got that right?
Eventually.
And we decided to come down here today to see Mr. Sanjay, and
This is Mr. Sanjay there.
to my utter amazement and surprise, he called me back minutes later to say that Mr. Saroop would be here, and I was absolutely delighted, because my intention was during this visit to Trinidad to also meet up with Mr. Saroop, and what I could, they say that you kill two birds with one stone. Well, we did it today, right? Because here's Mr. Sanjay, and here is Saroop at the same time with me. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today, and looking forward to whatever questions he wants to ask me about anything to do with the area or myself or the railways of Trinidad.
Okay, before we proceed to that aspect of, we shall now going to examine what Mr. Sanjay has in store for us. His paintings that bedeck this wall here, the four corners of this wall, I think. So, will you start, Sanjay? Let's focus on this picture here. This painting. This painting was done by you, Sanjay?
Yes. That painting is a representation or depiction of the Williamsville train station.
Okay.
At Williamsville Junction that we know it today. Actually, it is a painting I did for Mr. Beadon, and he is here to collect it. So I want to ask Mr. Beadon to give us a little rundown on the knowledge he has about this location. And being a train enthusiast, I'm sure he will really be happy to get into this.
Okay, before he comes, can you tell me where you got this? I mean, this never existed during your time, that is, since your birth until now.
Yeah. Well, I've always been hearing about this train station at Williamsville, and when I started painting, I started painting locations, popular locations in my birthplace, Gart Road, Williamsville. And when I came to this location here, I asked the older people in the area about it, and they gave me a little description about how the building was and where the train line run. And then I knew that Mr. Beadon is an authority on the railway system. He has done research in the railway system in Trinidad and Tobago, the TGR. And when I approached him, he sent me a sketch of this building as it was, and it actually, his description of the building coincide with the description of the older people in the area. So I armed with the description and little knowledge of how the place was located, I went on to paint this building.
Well, viewing this, Mr. Sanjay, I have known this building since a child. We used to play in this. It was abandoned then, and it was intact until the late 60s and early 70s. So we pitched marble and so on there. The village council had meetings there, the first meetings on this railway station. And as it is there, it is what is a true representation from my knowledge. And I think the description that the sketch that Mr. Beadon gave you, I think it is a true representation of what you have made now as an antique photograph of that station. Okay, let's move on now. Glen, Mr. Beadon, what do you have to say about that?
Okay, when Sanjay first contacted me, I was very, very interested in Williamsville particularly. And of course, Sam, as you know, you and I discussed Williamsville Station. In fact, the same sketch that I sent to him, I'd sent to you, and made a few refinements after you and I had discussed it. I always knew that at some point we'd want to recreate with a proper artist the station that is Williamsville. Williamsville is important because when the Trinidad Government Railway started opening the line to San Fernando, they had already acquired, remember the line to San Fernando opened in 1882, but in 1879, the Trinidad Government Railway, prior to opening the line to San Fernando, had already purchased two tramways. They purchased the San Fernando tramway, which ran from San Fernando to Cross Crossing, and they purchased the Guaracara tramway, which ran from Union Shipping Place all the way to Garth Estate. Okay, that is significant because when they bought that tramway, they decided to convert it to a railway. Tramway meaning an animal hauled tramway, right? Which it was in the very beginning, only to move sugar. Well, in 1884, when they got to San Fernando in 1882, they decided right away to start building a line to Princestown. And the line they chose to build was along the old Guaracara tramway, which meant that they had to build a new railway from Marabella Junction to Union, and then from Garth Estate into Princestown. Now, they started building that in 1882, right after they arrived in San Fernando. But the significance of Williamsville is very, very interesting because while they were building the Guaracara Railway, which opened on the 10th of November all the way to Princestown in 1884, Williamsville was actually the first station that was opened, and that opened on the 2nd of February 1884. So before they completed the entire line, the first terminus of the line was Williamsville. And that's why I've always wanted to have some photograph of Williamsville. The only photograph I have of Williamsville is of a train that has left the station, and Williamsville is like a very small dot in the distance. So nobody really has a proper photograph of the station that I have seen to date. So this painting, in effect, is, to me, the only existing depiction, proper historic depiction of the station. So that's why it was very important to me to work with Sanjay and to get this thing done. And you can see there we have a locomotive coming into the station. You'll see that later on. But what I love about this painting is the fact that he's got some brush cutters on the left-hand side, cutting the grass in front of the lines. You'll notice that although the line was a single line all the way from San Fernando through Marabella Junction into Princestown, each of the stations had what is called a passing loop. So one engine could come in, which you see it there entering the station. There's another line on the side which is where the other train would pass if there, for instance, was a cane train going the other way or something like that. But Williamsville is very important from that aspect as being the first station that was opened. And when you look at it, it's a typical Trinidad Government Railway country station with the two buildings on either side and two pavilions on either side with a cross roof in the center, providing a gallery, and then one or two other buildings on the side where you had ticket office and different things. And then you see the water tank, which is on the right-hand side, and that was used to replenish the steam locomotives. You know, steam locomotives required water, and the fire would then convert that water into steam, and the pressure would then be used to drive the pistons, which would drive the wheels and move the train. So, yeah, that's really a fantastic project. Sanjay has done a wonderful job. I mean, just look at that painting, and you could just feel that you're there. You see all the people on the platform waiting for the train. That's exactly as it would have been in the days of the railway. Now, the last train from Princestown into San Fernando ran on the 1st of April 1953, and I have a photograph that was taken just after the train left Williamsville of the last train, hauled by engine number 15, and it was taken by Dr. Arthur Down, who in the 1940s was based in Trinidad. He worked for Trinidad Leaseholds Limited, and Dr. Down was a railway enthusiast just like I am, and he took a lot of photographs of the railway system back in those days. Thank goodness he did, because not a lot exists. And it was a delight to me to find out that Dr. Down was in fact the same man who had recommended to the Minister of Transport in the 1960s to put locomotive number 11 in Harris Promenade. And not many people know that, but locomotive number 11 was the very first locomotive in Trinidad that used oil, local oil rather than coal. And of course that's a historic engine, and it's very good that it was put there. So we have something to look back on. If you look at the photograph of the painting, you'll see that engine that's running there is actually a Kitson, a typical Kitson. We had 20 such engines in Trinidad. It was a standard engine for the TGI in the beginning. And number 1 to number 20 had the same sort of outline, mostly built by Kitson of company. But you know, only one engine, number 16, was built by Naismith Wilson, but the remainder were all built by Kitson or used Kitson parts. So it's quite apt that we have a locomotive in Harris Promenade today that is one of the class of the original engines that came to Trinidad.
Okay. Now, you mentioned about Garth Estate.
Yeah.
Do you know where that factory was located, Garth?
I don't know the area too well, but Garth, there's a village there now.
Yeah,
right? There's a village there now, and the exact location of that estate, I don't know where it is. In fact, I was hoping that somebody knew where that was.
I've read a bit of history about David and his brother, the other Garth, and when they spoke about hauling the cane to the factory, I wonder how they did it. And they talk about the slush and whatever, but you have introduced something that they did not mention. That there was a tram, is that a tram hauled by?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, so actually Garth Estate, there was also Garth Rum, did you know that?
Garth Rum?
Yeah, I have an advertisement.
No, well, of course, if you read the book,
yeah.
the tallest thing it was, the book, it is. They talk about, they had problems, serious problem at Garth Estate.
Sure.
Serious with David, I think fellow is John.
Right.
John Stott. These two people.
So
but that's another history there, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, there's so much history around. I mean, I found an advertisement in the San Fernando Gazette of the, I think it was the 1840s, 1845, maybe 1850, advertising Garth Rum. And I'd never seen that before.
But they produce rum, if you read the book.
Of course they produce rum,
and that was the principal.
But I'd never seen an advertisement like that, so I was very happy to see that. But coming back to the tramway, remember that in the early days, all of the sugar estates were built in Trinidad along the coast. They did that because transportation was a big problem, right? And this area with the Zapate mud, when the rains fell, the roads would turn to mud and you couldn't move through the roads. So it was very difficult. So a lot of the estates built close to rivers, and the Guayakara River was a very important, like the Superior River and like the Cuba River and the Caroni and so on, were very important highways back in those days. So for instance, there would be a embarcadero or shipment point. So I don't know if you know this, but you have the Superior embarcadero. You also have the Guayakara embarcadero, and the Guayakara embarcadero was at a place called Union.
What is embarcadero?
Embarcadero means shipment point in French.
Okay.
So the early planters were French.
It's a port, is it?
It's like a port. It's like a landing point, right? So what you had is lighters, and the lighters would be pulled up the river.
Okay.
And then they get into the mouth of the river, and then either the produce was either taken into Port of Spain or it was taken out to ships. And then the raw sugar was probably taken in some cases to ships. I know, for instance, on the Superior River, the Superior Embarcadero lasted right up until 1958. So it was one of the last ones to go. But the sugar would be brought down river and then taken out to ships, loaded on ships, and then taken back to the UK, whatever. But the tramway, the original tramway, Guaracara tramway, was actually built in the late 1840s, and it ran from Union, which was the Embarcadero on the Guaracara River, to Garth Estate. And all along the way, they would go into different estates. It was animal hauled in those days, so they had mules or oxen pulling the wagons, right, along the tramway. And it was a very early tramway. But when the government purchased the Guaracara tramway in 1879, they then began to relay it as a steam tramway. And that's why some of the bridges have the date 1880 on them, because they had to rebuild the bridges to be able to take the steam locomotives, which were like tramway engines all the same, but you needed to have a sturdy bridge to get the heavy trains over. So then, of course, when in 1884, when they decided the TGR to build the line straight through the Princestown, they then ran the line from Marabella Junction to Union, where they joined up with the old tramway, and then down to Garth, and then from there into Princestown. So that is really where the Guaracara tramway came from, and that's when it started.
Okay, but do you know of a fact? I probably don't know this, but there's evidence that there were 3 factories located in Williamsville.
Well, of course, his brother's factory. At one time, there was a factory there. I think Ben Lomond had a factory as well.
Ben Lomond, but Ben Lomond was far off. Williamsville itself,
right,
which is within, let's say, about half a mile.
Right. Well, Williamsville and Brothers have a common connection too, right?
No, there's a place they call St. Margaret's. There's a factory there.
I don't know that.
There's evidence there because...
There's bricks and so on?
Yeah, bricks.
What's it called?
Well, it's Santa Margarita Estate.
Oh, Santa Margarita, yes, I know that one. Yes, okay. yes.
And there's a pond still there.
Right.
There are bricks strewn about the place.
Yep.
There are discarded, machinery, I didn't say machinery, but tools.
Yeah.
I know a certain person has one of those.
Right.
One of my neighbors.
But then there was also Buenintento.
No, that's far.
Sure, but there was another factory there at one time.
Well, you see, we're speaking about Williamsville.
Right, okay. And this area, you're talking this area.
Yeah, there's one, near Chutiwa, and there's a roadway going to Brother Lincoln Brothers.
Right.
Right? And the houses now occupied part of that mill, sugar mill then. There's a pond right now there.
Have you been to so you've been to all 3 of those estate sites?
It is quite visible.
Okay, the bricks are still there?
Well, one I could tell you,
right.
Shun bricks, roadway, right? The trace now.
Yeah, you see, these are areas we need to go and visit because a lot of these areas would have had tramways going into them at some point, and that's where my interest comes in, right?
There's a gentleman who lived there, and his name is Carmen Bocas, right? You will see the discarded or the remnants of a factory there.
Right.
And next door to his, about 200 feet, there's a pond. Right?
Have you been up to Los Tres Amigos?
Pardon me?
Los Tres Amigos.
That's where in Venezuela.
No. There's actually, it's in French, Le Tour Ami, which was another estate.
Where?
Right between Palmyra and Reform, there's another estate there.
Those things are distant away.
I know, but for me that's the same North Naparima area.
And there is another one near Ben Lomond.
Ben Lomond is another one, yeah. And Harmony Hall going on further.
There's a road that leads from Ben Lomond to Irie Village.
Yeah.
There's a factory there in the valley of Korea Road down there, right? So those are, it was during that time there were factories, many factories.
Yeah.
So let's go, do you have anything else to say?
No, I mean, Williamsville is really one of, this painting here. Then of course you have this other painting. I don't know if Sanjay would like to tell you about this one. If he wants to start off on that one.
Okay, where do you want to start off on this one,
Yes,
Sanjay?
this painting here.
Which one? That one there?
Yes, this painting here is a depiction of the Glenroy tunnel.
Hold on, please. This is it, eh?
Yeah.
Yes, Kadri. Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is a depiction of the Glenroy's tunnel up near where the
It's Margaretooth, isn't it?
Margaretooth, yes.
Margaretooth.
The Margaretooth scale yard was just in the back of that scene there in the midground. In the early 1900s, they decided to link the Cipero line to GAT, as well as to access the estates in the North Naparimas. They decided to build a tunnel. That was the only way to come through to...
Oh, there was a highland. There's a hill there.
Yes, it was
ridge.
an obstruction,
It was a ridge, yeah.
and they had to build a tunnel to access these estates with the train. So we have Mr. Glen Beadon again here. He
Okay.
knows a lot of this, and he will help
Well,
us
we
with
are
this.
now going to rely on Mr. Glen
Well, I wanted to just step in
for his
because
expertise.
yeah, if you want, you can keep it on there. I'll sit down here for a minute, but there's a few important aspects of this painting that are very interesting to all of us.
Okay.
And Sanjay and I spoke extensively over this.
So I'll
This-
focus.
so
I'll
this-
focus. I'll focus the camera.
Sure.
there now.
This ridge that you see here carries the Naparima Mayara Road into Princestown, right?
Okay.
And because of this ridge, in the early days, you had Margaretooth Estate on one side, you had Williamsville, Buenintento, Brothers, and all those other estates on the other side. At that time, some of those estates were all in the ownership of the Tennant company, Charles Tennant, which owned most of these estates. The problem is in the centralization process where they wanted to put one factory and carry all the cane from the surrounding estates under that company's ownership into one main factory, they had to be able to have a railway link. So for many years they talked about having a link between the Cipero tramway, which ran into Princestown, which is on the other side of that link and went up a very steep gradient, and the Guayacara tramway, which came around through Guayacara and through Williamsville and so on and into Princestown. There was no link between the two in the very beginning, because remember 1884, right? So around about, well, in fact 1912, in 1912 the government decided that they were going to build the railway to Siparia, and at that time they also decided they were going to build what was called the Guayacara-Cipero Junction Railway. And what that meant was they were going to try and bring a line through this ridge to join the two lines on both sides so that they could bring cane from those estates that are on the eastern side of the ridge into Margaretooth, which was modernized as a factory and was grinding cane for the entire area, right? So
Okay, but you're speaking about Margaretooth itself, right?
I'm speaking about Margaretooth Estate. Margaretooth Estate.
But there was a factory there?
There was a factory there, very big.
What do you know about? What do you know
Well,
about?
it was Charles Tennant owned that factory. Now they owned several factories, but they were going through a process of centralization, which meant that they were modernizing the factories, but they had to then enlarging them to grind a lot more cane,
So
making
what-
it more efficient. So rather than have 6 factories, 1 factory, but now you've got to get the cane into that factory,
Okay.
right? So in order to do that, the Trinidad Government Railway, that at that point was going to buy the Cipero tramway, decided that to bring the Cipero tramway into Princestown, they were going to cut a tunnel through here. In fact, they were going to put a cut in to begin with and build a bridge. But the consulting engineers in London, they ran a survey and they realized that a short tunnel under the ridge would be more cost effective, and they would use concrete to build it. So they built this tunnel, Glenroy Tunnel, and the reason it's called Glenroy Tunnel is because on this side of the ridge was Glenroy Estate. Because remember you had Glenroy and Margaretooth at one point. Now the other interesting aspect of this painting, very important, just like the Williamsville one I was talking about, when Sanjay and I spoke about it, we decided that we wanted to show the tramway locomotives, right? And that locomotive you see there is locomotive D. The tramway locomotives on the TGR were lettered, whereas the mainline engines like the Kitsons were numbered. So the Kitsons all had numbers, but these smaller engines had letters. These are lighter engines, right? So this engine was built by Hunslet, and it came to Trinidad in 1914. And it was at a time right after the Superior Tramway had been purchased by the TGR in 1913. The tunnel was not opened until July of 1914. Okay, so trains continued running into Princestown on the old station going over the top and stopping right in the center of town along what is now called Tramway Street. But then in 1914, in July, they opened the tunnel to passengers and the trains started coming through. And the first trains would have looked exactly like that. And that locomotive you see there, locomotive D, today resides at City Gate. It is incorrectly numbered 42, which was a much bigger engine, but that engine D is with us, it's extant, and it survives at City Gate today. And this is why we use that engine. That's why Sanjay did a fantastic job. I gave him several photographs so that he would get that engine right. And the you know, a lot of the paintings you see done about Trinidad Railways, the rolling stock and the technical aspects of the painting are not always right. Okay, that is where I come in. When people come to me and they want the technical aspects of the railway to be depicted in the correct form, they come to me. And here we did it very, very well. Those carriages are exactly the type of carriages that we used. These are the four-wheel original carriages built by the Gloucester Wagon Works of the UK. And this engine in front was built by Hunslet. It arrived in 1914 and it worked on the Guayakara Railway. On the Superior Tramway. There were two engines that were identical. There was engine D and engine E, and they're both identical. This one is engine D, and there it is pulling a passenger train. It has just passed Margaret Tooth on the other side of the bridge, and it's going to come in here now and swing to the right and come towards us and go into Princestown. So by that stage, there were two sets of services going to Princestown. One coming via Williamsville and one coming via using St. Madeleine and Friendship and so on, coming into Princestown. And this was the tramway engine coming in on the lighter track. So that, I mean, to me, again, just like in the case of Williamsville, here we have something that was never photographed. Okay? If you look around here, you see Sanjay has depicted the cane fields. This place was completely covered in cane fields in those days. I love the traffic on the main road. He's put a lot of people walking to and from along the old the San Fernando, well, they call it the Naparima Mayaro main road. And no photograph today that I have seen is in existence that shows a train coming through Glenroy Tunnel. So again, this is unique and it's very, very nice to have this.
And that's as far as we go.
Sorry?
That's as far as we go in respect to this.
Unless you have any other questions about that.
Well, how many factories do you know from stretching from Glenroy to using St. Madeleine?
How many factories?
Yeah. Or estates?
Well, you have many estates, right? From Glenroy, you had Buenintento, which is right beyond that. You had Garth Estate. I mean, that's going up along the Guayakara.
Okay.
But going the other way, you had Friendship. You had Margaret Tooth, of course. You had Cedar Hill. You also had, Taruba was further back. You had Bronte.
There was one Palmyra.
Palmyra was even further back. Palmyra was actually right next to Taruba, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm coming out. If you go along this line,
okay,
and you start going back, this was called the Daisy Line at one point, and you had a junction to Jordan Hill, right? So starting from here, going back, you have the Manahambra line as well, which went to the northern side. It went under the Manahambra main road, and it ended north of Bronte, which is a little bit higher ground. There's another line to Bronte, which came off at Jordan Hill Junction, which is now called Stanleyville Box. Stanleyville Box is still there to this day. It's the last remaining signal box in Trinidad.
Oh yeah.
But that line went through Cooper Grange, Jordan Hill, and then into Bronte, right? That was another line. Now that area was owned by Gordon, Gordon Grant and Company. They own that area, and towards the end of the railway period, they shut their factory down at Bronte, and they started shipping all their cane up to Esperanza, and that's why you had the special train that came along and joined this line, not here, but joined the line back at Jordan Hill Junction, went through San Fernando, and then ended up at Esperanza Estate. And people always ask the question, well, why was cane going away from using St. Madeleine, the biggest factory in the West Indies? And that's because that cane in that little area didn't belong to using St. Madeleine or the Colonial Company, or the St. Madeleine Sugar Company later on. it went to Esperanza, which was a more modern factory for Gordon Grant. So the cane story in Trinidad is very complex. You know, there are many estates in this area. For instance, there are 2 Friendship estates. There were 2 Endeavour estates, right? You know, there are 2 Cedar Hill estates. So you've got to be careful when you're talking about Cedar Hill and some of these estates, because there were 2 Reform estates.
But each has its own.
Well, each was in the county. You could.
No, but each has its own factory.
At one time, yes. And when you say factory, be careful, because a factory is where you crush cane and you manufacture sugar. But some of these factories were crushing cane with animal power or wind power or water power, and they were very small factories. Later on came steam. The first steam factory was at Harmony Hall, 1808. Right? You had very early steam that started coming in and modernizing the sugar industry. But the big factories, the big ones that we know today, you had Orange Grove, Forest Park, Reform, Usine St. Madeleine, Brecon Castle, right? These are some of the later one. Esperanza was another one, right? So later on, as the amalgamation or the centralization process continued, factories started to grind more. We ended up with only 2 main factories, Usine and Brecon Castle, right? All of the smaller factories, as Caroni started taking over all the sugar estates. Even people get confused with the name Caroni, because people say, oh yeah, that's Caroni. Well, there are 2 Caronis. A Caroni 1937, which Tate and Lyle owned 50% or even more than 50%. And then you had Caroni 1975, which the government of Trinidad and Tobago owned. But if you look at the word or the name Caroni, the original Caroni factory was, where Caroni Village is? Right, well, that factory was not called Caroni to begin with, it was called Frederick. And Frederick Settlement still exists there, right? That was Frederick Estate. But in 1900, it became Caroni Estate. And then, around about 1912 or so, they amalgamated with Brecon Castle, and then Waterloo was also brought in. The two grinding operations at Caroni, which was Frederick, and Waterloo then went away, and they rebuilt Brecon Castle into a much bigger, because the original factory at Brecon Castle wasn't where it is today. It was on the other side of the railway line, and it was rebuilt into a much larger, much more modern factory in 1949, and that's when centralization started there. And by that stage, there were railways all over central Trinidad, right? Usine St. Madeleine at one point had more track mileage of railway than the Trinidad Government Railway itself. Okay, Trinidad Government Railway at its peak was 124 miles. Usine St. Madeleine system was even greater than that at one time, right? So, up until 1960, all cane to factory came by rail, right? But after 1960, and a process that actually started by the Jessup report in 1957, right? The Jessup report of 1957 talked about the closure of the railways and created a blueprint of road transport in Trinidad. And in 1960, Usine St. Madeleine and some of the other sugar manufacturers started to put together a policy of placing greater stress on road rather than rail for their transport infrastructure. And that is when they started building these M4 and all these roads around here, the Tasca roads as we know them today. Well, of course, they're gone now, but the Tasca road came in, and by 64, only 45% of cane to factory came by rail. It started diminishing, right? And the last cane to factory, of course, was the Valley Line, going all the way down to Barapore, and that ended in 1998, right? The last train came in on the 15th of February 1998. That was it. That was when standard gauge railways in Trinidad closed forever. So
okay, really from your knowledge, how far east did the sugarcane industry extend?
That's an interesting one. How much time have you got? Because the fertile land was in the center of Trinidad, but there's no transport there, right? Mm-hmm. So that is for that reason you had the Rio Claro line built. But cane was picked up by rail as far east as Rio Claro. And in the north, as far east as Komutu and those areas had cane scales. And that cane, of course, went to Orange Grove and those northern estates. But that's how far east. But, for the most part, cane was put down where it was easy to cut and to transport.
By rail?
Even by rail or by animal power. Right? What tended to happen is the rail would go down in the valleys. You'd have scales. I'm writing a book about that now. You'd have the scales, and you'd have a little crane, And what they'll do is they cut it in the field and bring it down with animal power to these scales. Then it'll be loaded onto rail cars and then taken to the factory, right? And I can tell you that Brecon Castle cane and what's the other one? Woodford Lodge cane came from as far east as Jerningham Junction, Todd's Road. All that went, into Woodford Lodge. Woodford Lodge had a vast railway system too, right? I didn't mention that earlier on, but Woodford Lodge was one of the last private ones. Woodford Lodge, Forest Park, and Orange Grove were the last 3 privately owned sugar cane factories that were in Trinidad, right? So the history of the rail in Trinidad is indelibly linked, with sugar. Look, the Trinidad Government Railway started in 1876. Cane was being transported by rail from 1836. And then the Trinidad Government Railway ended in 1968. 30 years later, the cane industry ended in 1998. So, the railways really were all about cane. And sadly, they began with cane and they ended with cane.
I think it was 2003 the CSAM.
Yes, the sugar industry ended in 2003.
Yeah.
But 1998, once sugar stopped going by train, it was all by truck. It was in deep decline by then.
Okay.
And it didn't last very
Well,
long.
thank you for that elucidation and expertise in both the estate and the railway system. Thank you,
My pleasure.
Honorable Glen Beadon. So we're going to peruse some of these photographs now, or painting, sorry. Which one do you wish to comment on? Glenn, from your knowledge of geography, how you could describe that painting there?
Me or Sanji?
You.
Or me? Well, I would say that looks like part of the Guaycara River and looks like a river lime. Somebody picking coconuts and somebody fishing, or somebody, and they have a fire going there. That looks to me like a river lime. I don't know, is that correct?
The name of the painting actually is the river line.
Is it? Where is that? Where is that written?
It's not there.
Okay.
It's just,
Okay, Sanjay, you are the painter, right?
yes. This is an imaginary painting with my experience of 3 different locations.
Okay.
So the coconut tree there, that
Okay.
was another location.
Okay.
The mango tree is a second location, and the background is a river up north.
Okay.
Yes, so I merged these 3 scenes together in my head and compose it into what we call a river line locally.
Okay.
You see the boys in and cooking and thing over there. I don't know, maybe something that can be. And the linemen around the fire drinking the beers. If you turn right side there, in the corner, lower, you'll see a big group of coconut. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's a grub of coconut.
Yeah, they would climb up the tree and
Oh, there's a man on the tree.
yeah,
There. He's a
yes.
climber.
Yes, he just sent down that group of coconut with that rope over there, oversized rope, and we boy here with the white jersey, a cutlass in his hands, almost looking like he keeping that guy on the tree there, but he was pointing out the parrot on the coconut tree.
Oh, there's a parrot on the
Yes,
tree.
if you look just above the coconuts there, you'll see a little parrot. Yeah.
Okay.
So these things, while I was painting this painting,
I think this is one of the pots that was on the picture.
yeah, this is a Trini curry. That is the name of the painting, a Trini curry. It is an outdoor cook, maybe by a river or a pond or something again, or by the beach. That is a painting that a chef from New York gave me to do. It was commissioned by a chef in New York, and she will collect it soon.
Okay. And what about this one there?
This here, with the 2 coconut trees on the bridge, is another imaginary painting that I did. It is depicting a long ago scene of an old man, leaving his hut in the back there and going out to the gardens. See, he have his gardening implements and a little bag there, and his children reaching him by his by the bridge over there and playing. It is a scene that I would have seen somewhere
And the yellow tree is what now?
This here, the yellow tree is a pui tree.
Okay.
Yes, that is part of my imagination. I wanted to use the.
And let's move forward here, Sanjay.
Yes.
This painting here.
This painting here is reminiscent of a house that once existed in Palmyra.
Okay.
It is Mr. Beadon has more knowledge about this house, I believe.
Mr. Beadon, I think.
Which house is that?
This house here, in one of your posts, you posted this house, Palmyra, a house in Palmyra. I can't remember the name.
Oh, no, the house I posted in Palmyra is probably one that replaced that house, because the one there was the reform workers or the reform overseers house. That was that's the one that you're thinking about. It's not this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a much earlier house. And if you look at the copper there, you see it there?
That was imaginary.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. The surroundings is imaginary, but the house itself was inspired by that picture.
Okay. This is.
That is an unfinished painting commissioned by a cousin of mine.
Okay, so you're on working. So this we have finally, okay, this is a parrot here.
That is my personal pet. I did his portrait,
Okay.
and
Okay. I think we have viewed everything.
Since we were dealing with Gertrude, I had a painting. This painting here. Can see it good? This painting is a depiction of the brothers' estate back in the early to mid 1900s.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a time when the train was working. This actually happens to be engine number 13.
Okay.
Yes, it is one similar to the one that is in Harris Promenade. Yeah, and this is the silo and water tank. This here is where they used to store the animals, the stables for the animal, and this one here was the place where they kept the sick and recovering animals, and this separate stable. There was a grinding wheel that they sharpened the cutlass here, and this is the storehouse, the fertilizer and equipment storehouse, and in the back there was the office building. Today these things have disappeared except for the silo and part of this double building here.
Okay, Mr. Beadon, I think you should have lend your expertise
Okay,
in
so-
describing.
Should I?
No,
think you have-
you stay right there, because Sanjay actually did this painting before I came on the scene with him.
Okay.
And the only thing I helped him with somewhat was the locomotive. Okay. But what I like very much what he did here, very much on his own. He knows the terrain of the area, and so do you, Sam. You've been down there. In fact, I've seen a video of you taking a man along what used to be the old railway line and interviewing him, and he was pointing out all the same things that Sanjay was just pointing out there to you. I think the silo is still there to this day, right?
Yeah.
It is,
The
yeah.
silo is still there. But if you look back at the painting here, I want to point something out. This train is actually coming from Princestown and heading back to San Fernando. Now this is the brothers' estate, but here's a very important junction, because in the old days, the train would come along here back from along the Guayacara line, back from Princestown, that's down there, into San Fernando, it's here. But here there's a junction, and you notice the cane wagons here, right? Because that line actually goes around, and eventually it goes all the way down to Buenintento, and there's also a scale called Tableland Scale, which is further east, not quite the Tableland, but the scale is called Tableland Scale. But there were a couple of scales, and there's another village which
Is
escapes
it
my
La
mind.
Gloria, is it?
Sorry?
Is it
And
La-
La Gloria is another one, yeah. But there's another village that escapes my mind. It's just along that line. Sigobin?
Govian Village.
Govin Village, that's it. So Govin Village is just along there. But the line, look at it here. It goes, Sanjay has done it extremely well. It goes all the way back, and it follows that valley down. And that line was where trains going to Eugene, or in the early days going to Marguerite, would come along here. What they would do, they would come along here, they would pull the cargo or push the cargo. See, The train is there, right? The engine's on the other side. So it pushed the cargo up this way, and now the engine's on the front, and it'll proceed in that direction.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So that was the operation they used to do in order to go back towards Marguerite and to Usine St. Madeleine later on. Because in 1922, Usine St. Madeleine bought all of the tenants' estates. So now all of this fell under Usine St. Madeleine, which was in those days called the St. Madeleine Sugar Company. Because actually, when the small estates started to amalgamate, you had the colonial company from around about 1874. You had the colonial company. Then in the 1890s, it became the new colonial company, and in 1913, it became the St. Madeleine Sugar Company. And then not until 1962, it became Caroni Usine St. Madeleine. So it's another beautiful painting. I mean, if you look at that, today you could probably stand on that ridge and see the same terrain as you see right there in the painting. It's absolutely wonderful.
Well, Mr. Glen Beadon, well, it's an honor to be in your illustrious company. But the man they call Glen Beadon, the name is synonymous with the railway system in this country and the estate. But who is this Glen Beadon? Can you say something about
Glen Beadon is just a railway enthusiast, someone who loves trains, and especially Trinidad trains, and who watched these steam engines in San Fernando in the 60s and just fell in love with the whole railway system and the way they worked, and that's really, I'm not really a historian or anything like that, I'm just a railway enthusiast.
Okay, well, we need to get your parental background and see.
Parental background?
Yes.
Well, okay, I'll give you a little bit of history of my parental background. My mother's grandfather came to Trinidad in around about 1900 from St. Vincent, and they had been in St. Vincent for close to 100 years, and they were overseers of Sugarcane Estates in St. Vincent. But when he came to Trinidad by 1904, he set up a piano works that was in Port of Spain on the corner of Park and Abercrombie Street, and it was called Eureka Piano Works. And a few years there, they lived across the road above another shop. They lived there for many years. They weren't very wealthy, but they did well with the piano works. And in around about 1927, he moved into the St. Anne's Valley. He bought an estate in the St. Anne's Valley, and they had a house there, and we've been on that land since 1927. So in a couple of years' time, we've been on that land 100 years. So that's on my mother's side, right? They were the Agar family and then the Wallace family. The Agars were from Ireland originally, and the Wallaces from Scotland. But the Beadon family, my father's father, he came to Trinidad in 1949. They arrived on the SS Araguani on the 19th of January. My father was 12 years old, and he came here as police commissioner. He was probably the last British police commissioner in Trinidad. And my father, of course, came here 12 years old, loved Trinidad. He'd just come from war-torn, post-war Britain, which was pretty gloomy. So to come into the tropics and to step off that ship into the beautiful, lush vegetation in Trinidad, and of course a city that was so beautiful back in those days. He just fell in love with Trinidad. So, he eventually met my mother, married my mother, and that's how, we ended up living in Trinidad. That's how I ended up here. So,
okay, did you go to school in this country?
I did until I was about, my education is a bit mixed, right? I went to school here till I was about maybe 9 years old. That's in San Fernando. And then from there we went to Venezuela. My father got a job in Venezuela in the oil industry there. So I was in a Venezuelan school for a while. But then my grandfather was not very impressed with our education level being in Venezuela. We were in a Spanish-speaking school. So insisted that we get sent to a British boarding school. So we ended up in a place called Eastbourne. I went to prep school there called Chelmsford Hall, and then I went to Eastbourne College, and that's where I went to school. And there my love of trains was even amplified because we had a model railway society, we had a railway society, and I found that in the UK there were many railway magazines, there were preservation societies, and my interest in railways was further amplified by being in that country. And that's where I live today, and surrounded by my wonderful, beloved railways.
Okay, what is your profession?
Profession? Yeah. Well, I was in the oil and gas industry. I worked for, I was in the drilling business to begin with, but I ended up working for a company called Schlumberger for 35 years. And with that company, I worked in Trinidad, Venezuela, Brazil, all over the world: Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Scotland, United States. So I was able to move across the world, and my kids, were able to.
So you tested all the soils in this country?
Well, I drilled in many places, and
And tasted some too?
I did. I tasted a lot of food, but also, on my time off, chased railways too.
Okay.
So I saw lots of different trains and so on. So all that added to it.
Well, I must commend you for your achievements and your knowledge of the railway system and historical background. And you seem to be a very educated person.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I have been reading what you write, and I'm very much impressed with them.
Thank you, sir. Well, I've been reading what you write. I'm very impressed with that too.
Thank you very much. So, Sanjay, it was a pleasure inviting us here. In fact, I came impromptu. I didn't tell you I was coming. But
Thanks very much for the visit also. I was looking forward to meeting you and getting your new book also. I have a book for you, and I have a book for Mr. Beadon also. If you want, I would like to show my book on.
Sure, and we could present one to my good friend here. So what about you?
Come on, Graham, give us a little background on you.
Me? Well, I was born in England. I went to school in a place called Blackpool, which is north of England. And went to a public school called Arnold School after that. Went to University of Manchester. Studied medicine for 5 years and qualified for that. Became a GP in Blackpool and did that for 30 years. And now I've retired.
So you're a medical doctor?
A medical doctor.
A specialist?
Yeah. Just a GP, general practitioner.
Okay, I have a nephew who is in England. He practices there with his wife. His wife is she's a heart specialist.
Right. No, general practice is just general. You're like a jack of all trades.
His name is Dr. Saroop, and his wife's name is Wishma Saroop in England.
I've not heard of them. No.
Well, they may be far from you.
Well,
What's your name again?
Graham Parkinson.
Okay, doctor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
How do you enjoy the country we're here?
The country is absolutely marvellous. I mean, it's one of those places that you wouldn't go on holiday, I think, because they don't kind of encourage tourism to an extent.
No, I'm speaking about your drive up here.
Oh, the drive up here, yes, lovely, yeah. It's right through all the old plantations, sugar plantations, which are not there sadly anymore. But Glen tells me that the place was very beautiful before.
Yeah, but he has toured this whole country, Wherever the railway line leads him, he walks.
I like the journey down here. I mean, once you get into the countryside, this last few miles has been lovely to drive through.
Okay, yeah. So you're a musician also?
Yes, I've...
But can you give us, can you play the instrument?
Oh, I can do a bit of... I'll sit down actually.
I don't know if it cut off or not.
Is it? I think it might still be. Yeah, still. I'm just trying to study jazz blues, but...
Thank you very much. Well done. Your expertise on the piano also, eh?
That's what I do now.
Okay, this is Sanjay here. Sanjay has...
Mr. Glen Beadon will endorse my book that I did.
Look at this. Fantastic.
Well, this is a book of a collection of his Sanjay's painting.
Yes, and he not only put the paintings in there, but he's actually done a bit of research. And he's, if you look through the book, there's a little bit of history, and also each of the pieces has a little write-up. So it's not only just a painting and not only just a title, but each one has a little bit of history, right? And the history, some of it I've helped him with, a little bit, right? But he's written it himself, and he's done a very, very good job. I mean, things like the barracks, very important aspects. These barracks are now gone; they're no longer there. but the original indentured laborers that came from India lived in these barracks, and these were common everyday life things that were there but are now completely gone. And they were not wonderful places, but there's a certain beauty in the nostalgia behind the lives of people that were past and lived in these places that we must not forget. Right? There's a train coming through Glenroy Tunnel. This is. I don't have my glasses on right now, so I can't see everyone. But I mean, look. This is another one here. This is Garth, right?
Yes, that is Garth.
So this is Garth Road here. Yeah. Fantastic. And this is, where's this one? Is this in the Nagar at the moment? Or is
Yes,
that in?
that one's in Nagar.
Yeah. So that's on display. So he's done a lot of great stuff that has, for the most part, images that do not exist today in photographs. So what Sanjay's done is a very important job in recreating these areas and these things that are only in certain people. In fact, very soon they'll be gone from living memory. So all we'll have are these pictures and these images, right? Because actually, you remember this station, but soon the younger generation he didn't know this station. The younger generation will not, and they will have now these images to look back on, and to remember what was once there. Beautiful, absolutely. Look at this one. The scale with the K. This is absolutely wonderful. If I could own them all, I would, but there's no space in my house for so many. But look at them, beautiful paintings. So,
well, Sandy, I must congratulate you for this job well done.
Thanks very much, Mr.
And in fact, I always admire and comment. Remember on the Facebook and so on, all your paintings that you exhibit or have exhibited. Do you wish to say anything there?
I want to thank each and every one of you all for coming for the slime today. It is very refreshing. You are gentlemen of high standard and great respect in my heart. Both of you. I've learned a lot from you all.
Talking about you.
And
you speak about me, is it?
Talking about you.
I think we're referring to Glen, is it?
both of you.
Okay, both.
Yes. I've learned a lot from you all, and without your help, I wouldn't have been successful with this.
Okay. Well, speaking about Glen, I mean, sometimes I refer to you for your expertise, and you have guided me too. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
So I must commend you, not commend, but compliment you.
Thank you. You're going to make me blush, but what I would say is that the collaboration between us has been vastly important. You don't understand, right? I mean, to be able to speak to somebody like yourself, Sam, and to get information from you, and then to be able to collaborate with Sanjay to create these wonderful images, especially with the talent that he has, it's just amazing. I love this sort of thing, So it's been fun for me. It's been a passion of mine, and I don't see it as any kind of work, and I'm very happy to help. I'm very happy to be able to receive information back.
Okay, well, certainly, while we live.
Life is good.
Good. And we shall meet again someday, soon. But thank you very much. It's a coincidental meeting, and it's not online. It wasn't online. We just met.
That's right.
But thank you very much.
A higher being wanted us together today, and here we are.
So we'll meet soon again.
We will.
I'll be here for a little while.
Okay.
So we'll collaborate again to
Very
bring
good.
New stories, new people.
All the time.
Thank you very much. Well, this is Sam Saroop signing off from the Art Gallery of Sanjay Dharamdas, located at 17 Quarry Road in Guaracara, Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.